Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Nella Young, and you are here for a webinar about the Enterprise Rose Architectural Fellowship. We will be starting just a couple minutes after the hour because a lot of people are logging in right now and joining the call. So stay tuned, and we will begin shortly. Hi, for those who have just joined, we are going to start in just a couple minutes after a few more people have logged in because people are calling in as we speak. So stay tuned and we will begin in a few minutes. Okay, we're going to get started. I think people will begin joining us as we start, but I'm just covering a couple of little logistical details at the beginning, so we might as well begin so we have plenty of time for discussion through the course of the conversation. So welcome, everyone. This is a webinar about the Enterprise Rose Fellowship, and today you're going to have a chance to hear from current fellows and ask your questions after we offer a little bit of an overview of the program in general. So my name's Nella. I am a Senior Program Director here at Enterprise, and I am part of the Rose Fellowship team, and I also lead a lot of our other creative placemaking programming at Enterprise, and I'm going to be your moderator today on this call. And I am joined by Mark Matel, who directs the fellowship, as well as a couple of current Rose Fellows. But before we get started, I'm going to go through a few logistics so you can fully participate. This is just a quick snapshot of our agenda, but I'll go through it after I get the details on using WebEx. So you're on the WebEx platform, and we're hoping that many of you have a lot of questions during the course of this conversation. So as you think of them, you've been muted on entry because it really affects the sound quality to have people unmuted. So as you think of your questions during the conversation at the beginning, please submit them anytime to our panelists, and you can use the Q&A panel. It may be at the bottom of your screen, and then you can expand it by clicking on the arrow. It should be on the right side. And as it says here, please direct your question to all panelists. That should be the default, but it's helpful if we all see the questions coming in. Also, many people use the streaming audio on their computer, and that usually works fine, but sometimes local conditions can cause interference and poor sound quality. So if that does happen to you, you can switch over to a phone line for your audio, and you can sort of see this little arrow and circle showing you what to click on. And the dial-in numbers will appear if you click on the little circle to the left of the red button and switch audio and follow the prompts. You should be able to call in. So at the end of the event, you will be automatically taken to a 2-question survey, and we'd love to get your feedback. And it will also give you an opportunity to put any questions in that didn't get answered so that we can make sure to include them in the FAQ update that we do on our website. This event will be recorded, and we will let you know by email when the archive is available on our website, or you can visit the Rose Fellowship page of the website to see when it's been loaded up there. So hopefully that makes WebEx even easier to use and gives you all the opportunity to submit questions in the Q&A, and we're going to look forward to seeing those come in as we go, but we're going to first hear a little bit of setup and introduction. So our agenda is to spend about 10 minutes on an overview of Enterprise and the Rose Fellowship Program. And then we're going to hear specifically from 2 current fellows, Michele Stadelman in Mississippi and Nick Satterfield in New Orleans. And then Mark Matel, who directs the fellowship and is also an alum of the program, is going to begin with a couple of FAQs that we typically get from the process, and then we'll open it up to discussion, and hopefully there will be plenty of questions that we can answer and talk about. So with that, that's an image of our lovely presenters. I'm going to just say a word about Enterprise. So Enterprise is a national nonprofit. We call ourselves an intermediary, which means we work really at the intersection of larger federal and state systems and the community development organizations doing community-based, neighborhood-based development across the U.S. And we try to be really effective at bridging capital, policy, and solutions to improve the neighborhoods all around the country, in particular serving low-income residents and focused on affordable housing. So I am going to pass the mic to Mark Matel, who's going to talk a little bit about the Rose Fellowship specifically, which is a program of our national initiatives at Enterprise. Mark.
Thanks, Nella, for that wonderful introduction. Can everyone hear me okay? All right.
You sound good to me.
Well, okay, thanks, Nella. And welcome all for participating in our Rose Fellow FAQ. Here is a slide of our Rose Fellowship program. This is our 19th year. We started in late 2001. And we are going to be celebrating 20 years next year, which is a huge milestone for us. Here, this slide deck, you can see currently what's slated in magenta are the 8 opportunities that all of you are interested in applying for. The states allocated in blue are the current locations of our current fellows. Right now we have a class of 14, and we are so happy to have 8 new opportunities and fellows to join us in the fall of this year. And just to tell you a little bit about the Rose Fellowship framework, it's really a partnership of 3 components, which is us, Enterprise Community Partners, which helps facilitate and deploy the fellowship, yourself, the applicant, and future fellow who is interested in working in community-based design, and also the host. They are really one of the more critical partners in this triad because they are really providing the opportunity to engage, experiment, and lead an initiative and provide an opportunity for yourself as a fellow to help us solve some of the issues that are happening in community design. Next slide, please. And, you know, our mission really is to provide opportunities for our architects and artists, landscape architects, to really enter into an opportunity where you don't traditionally get a chance to, which is to be in a sort of ownership, decision-making level, to help improve the lives of underserved communities, and they range from an urban context to a rural context across the country. And for those of you who don't know, this year we're really excited to partner with Art Place to provide an opportunity for artists to join the Rose Fellowship cohort. Again, traditionally for the last 19 years, we have had primarily landscape and architects in our Rose Fellowship program. And with the partnership with Art Place this year, we're going to sort of enter into a new phase of the Rose Fellowship where artists, help us solve some of the issues that are happening in these communities. And we're really excited to have these opportunities. One is based in Salem, Massachusetts, the other in Los Angeles, LA, and Los Angeles, California, and Austin, Texas. And with these three organizations partnering with us, we really think we can provide a wonderful opportunity to figure out how artists can actually help us understand the issues that are happening in community design. Again, if I can run through the quick timeline. Next slide, please. As you can see here, we have had our Rose Fellowship host webinars on February 12th and the 14th, and those are uploaded on the website for you to download and hear. And currently, where we are right now is the Rose Fellowship FAQ. Again, just as a reiteration, the Rose Fellowship application deadline closes on April 14th. We spend about a month to review the process of all of the applicants and vet them through our rigorous review process. And then in June, our selection committee meets to review all of the finalists who will be eventually interviewing in the month of June and July at their respective hosts. All finalists who make it to the selection committee will be notified that they have moved on to the next round. And then after the actual physical interviews during the month of June and July, the Rose Fellow will be selected for that particular host, and they will start in October 1st. So that is our rough timeline, and we will provide more detail on that on our website as we move forward. Next slide, please. And now, without further ado, we really want to invite two of our current fellows today to help join us to tell a little bit about their experience and what it's like to be ingrained in a host organization and what their fellowships are really like. Both Michele and Nick are still under the model of the 3-year format. Fellowships moving forward will all be under the 2-year format. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Michele Stadelman, who's based out of Hope Enterprise Corporation and Delta Design Build Workshop in Greenwood, Mississippi, and I'll have her talk a little bit about herself. Right. Your ball, Michele.
Hi, thanks, Mark. Hi. Thank you, Mark and Nella and everyone for the opportunity to share. My name is Michele Stadelman, as was mentioned. I'm the rural-based fellow that's from the 2017 to 2019 cohort. And up on the screen, you can see some soybeans, but also the map, you'll see there's 2 dots. One is Greenwood, Mississippi, and the other is Jackson. I'm co-hosted between 2 organizations, Hope Enterprise Corporation, which is the nonprofit arm of Hope Credit Union, working in 5 states throughout the Deep South. And then the other organization is Delta Design Build Workshop, which was founded by one of the past Rose Fellows and her husband in Greenwood, Mississippi, after her fellowship ended. Both organizations have kind of similar missions, one being a credit union, though, and one being a design build organization. I've kind of formally said that I'm that connection, and that the mission of the fellowship is bringing those 2 missions together to help improve communities and build up social equity and actual financial equity throughout the Delta. So this is my little blurb about what I wrote my fellowship mission to be. And so this is a graphic that shows the projects that I'm working on and geographically where I'm working. As the rural fellow, I cover a lot of ground, as you can see throughout the state, and then I color-coded it so you can see the variety of projects that I'm doing. But to dive in a little bit deeper, the first group of projects I'll talk about is the housing work I do, which I'd say is about 35% of my time. And in that work, what I'm doing is a lot of project management as well as community engagement and talking with the different communities about what is needed for housing throughout the Delta. This image is a subdivision called Eastmore Estates, which is outside of a small community of Moorhead, Mississippi. And it's undergoing a full revitalization project. And so the dots indicate the renovation projects as well as the new construction that's going on. And in addition to that, and here are some before and after pictures, as well as the new housing design, being at a rural location allows me to work in a lot of different communities, as you can probably tell by the map. But also it's about capacity building. And so I get to wear a lot of different hats in the community. So I'm doing a little bit of designing. Since I'm at a design build organization, I get to put on a tool belt some days. And then since I'm at a bank, I get to go and talk about loan closing paperwork and things like that. Other things that I'm doing then, I'm providing a lot of technical assistance. And really, if I had to sum up what I do is capacity building. I'm working with towns to write grants, to do project management for those grants, and then to help them figure out how to talk to their residents and community in productive ways. So I'm working on blight elimination, which is state funding that's allocated to eliminate a lot of residential blight properties throughout the state. Then I'm doing a lot of, this is what I kind of did a catch-all of, small town engagement. And so here's an example of my pavilion that I got to design and build for a small town in Drew, which served as a catalyst to kind of encourage some other development to happen within the community and to gain some trust within the community. Other things that we do really are then tied to, oh, I skipped a slide, sorry, are really tied to the actual helping the leadership figuring out what they need and what we can provide to them, and really spending time with the residents to help identify that. The last, I don't know, I stopped doing the math, I guess. I'd say the last 5 to 10% of my time is what's kind of referred to as stretch. And this is professional development for myself, as well as mission-driven work that fits outside of kind of what my 8 to 5 work hour includes. And that work allows me to connect with the community in different ways, and also push my organizations towards doing some other types of projects and engagement. So these are some photos of community members, as well as the Rose Fellowship and Enterprise community that I get to work with every day. And so I guess that's the quick, I tried to talk fast, synopsis of what I'm doing.
Super. Thanks, Michelle. I am going to pass it to Nick to share a little bit about his fellowship, and then we'll open it up for a little bit more conversation soon. Nick, I'm unmuting you, and you should be ready.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Hey everyone, this is Nick Satterfield. I am the Rhodes Fellow based in New Orleans. But before I go into my presentation, I really love this slide that Michelle kind of left here. She sort of gave a good comprehensive look at the people that she deals with in her fellowship. But also in the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to see a lot of the enterprise community, the fellowship community. And I think that was one of the sort of unknown, really great elements of the fellowship for me when I started. You know, I read the work plan, I saw what I would be doing as a fellow, but I did not know kind of how deep the connection to the fellowship community would become once I started. So I just kind of wanted to add that little bit to the end of your presentation, Michelle. So as I mentioned earlier, I am the Rhodes Fellow hosted in New Orleans, Louisiana, with the New Orleans Redevelopment Authority. We We refer to ourselves as Nora here. My background, I was an architect working in Louisville, Kentucky for about 5 years prior to the fellowship, and had followed the fellowship for a really long time and wanted to wait until I felt like the right opportunity presented itself. And when I saw the New Orleans fellowship come online, the work plan was really interesting, and my wife is also a New Orleans native, so it was a really nice opportunity for us to move back and be with family, but also really focus on a work plan that I felt like I could execute. So here at the New Orleans Redevelopment Authority, we are a catalyst for the revitalization of the city, partnering in strategic developments that celebrate the city's neighborhoods and honor its traditions. Nora has essentially 3 areas of programming, and my fellowship really touches on all 3. Housing development, we primarily work in the housing space through providing affordable home ownership opportunities through subsidizing the sale of single-family residences. We have a commercial revitalization portfolio. We offer small gap financing grants as well as a reimbursable facade improvement grant in selected historic areas of the city. I would say between housing development and commercial revitalization, that really makes up about 50% of the work that I do. And then the other piece, really the focus of the fellowship, is this third element, this land stewardship piece, as we call it. And what that really is, it's really looking at ways that we can use vacant land in the city to implement green infrastructure and reduce flooding. And in New Orleans, flooding, as most of you all probably know, is an issue. But it's not an issue as most people would think. You know, when people think about flooding in New Orleans, this is kind of the picture that they see. They think about levees breaching. They think about, 80% of the city underwater. But what really is a threat to us every day is flooding from heavy rain. Because New Orleans is below sea level, every drop of rain that falls in the city must be pumped out. And our infrastructure is aging. We have a lot of pumps and a lot of pipes that are busted, that are broken, storm drains that are clogged. And so what you'll see is, if you look at the top photograph, that's a photograph of the city after Katrina. Down below, there was a pretty severe thunderstorm that rolled through on August 5th, 2017. And you can see the photos are almost identical. And so what we really deal with, what we battle with every day, is this sort of issue of street flooding. We call it nuisance flooding. This is not the type of flooding that's going to cause, the potential for loss of life, but it is something that's going to cause significant property damage, and it's going to become a burden on the residents of the city. And so the work that we're doing is really focused on that. And this really piggybacks on a huge network of programs that the city has been implementing since Katrina. It started with, partnering with the folks in the Netherlands. There was a series called the Dutch Dialogues, where we were learning as a city how they manage water, because as a country, their entire country is below sea level. That sort of resulted in Wagner and Ball architects developing the urban water plan. Living with water. How do we, as a city that's below sea level, how do we learn how to manage water and live with water in our city? Following that, the city developed a really comprehensive strategy, Resilient New Orleans, looking at ways that we can manage water, but also looking at other ways that we can become a more resilient city. In 2012, we received a grant from HUD through the National Disaster Resilience Competition. The grant award was $141 million, and it funded essentially 12 different types of projects in the city. And what we were trying to do was identify one area of the city where we could test these new resilient strategies. And we created sort of a comprehensive strategy, looking at multiple scales and how we could impact the residents in this neighborhood. So we're looking at the house and garden. What can we do on an individual lot? What can we do in aggregate as a block? What can the neighborhood do? And then ultimately, what can we do to create a resilient district? And as at Nora, our piece in that entire puzzle was really the smallest piece, but it was the most directly impactful for the residents. We had that home and lot piece. So what we did was we created a program called the Community Adaptation Program. We have about $5 million worth of funding to implement between 200 and 300 individual homeowner retrofits. This program was launched in July, and it really only had 3 criteria to be eligible. You had to own your home, it had to be within the boundaries of the Resilience District, and because this is a HUD-funded grant, there were income requirements. So there was an income threshold. You had to make at or below 80% of the area median income to qualify. And the types of things that we're looking at with this program range from implementing rain gardens, we can plant trees. The majority of the folks in the city have had issues with subsidence and settlement, so replacing driveways with permeable paving has been a really popular option. And what we really wanted to do was put the homeowners in the driver's seat with this program. So once you're approved for the program, you're partnered with a landscape architect, and you go through a formal design process to really map out what you want to do on your property. Upon the homeowner approving the design, it comes to Nora. We just make sure that it's within budget. Everyone receives the same maximum amount of money, which is $25,000. We make sure that it's within budget. We make sure that all of the interventions are really focused on managing stormwater, and then from there, the homeowners are kind of off and running. Just to give you all kind of a quick synopsis, so the program really started in July, but my fellowship started in 2017. And so one thing I'll let everybody know is typically the types of folks that apply for this fellowship are pretty eager to do work, to make impacts in their work and to move the needle. And one thing I've learned is change doesn't happen overnight, and these things take time. And real change and real impact only comes through sort of long-term investments in neighborhoods and communities and organizations. And so I've been here. This is going on my 3rd year. My sole focus was really creating this program, launching this program, getting it off the ground. Here we are in March of 2019, and we were able to see really the impact, the potential impact that this program has had. So our target was 200 participants by 2022. To date, we've received 575 total responses. We've approved roughly 128 homeowners to participate. 88 of those projects are currently under design and construction. Another 40 are set to begin design in the summer. And then there are 109 other applicants that are in the process of finalizing their applications. We're reviewing their documents, making sure they're certified to participate. And then ultimately they will probably begin design in the fall. And so we're hoping, I think the goal of 200 by 2022 is reachable, but we really want to have a pipeline ready of the 200 plus by the end of the year. And I think that's a realistic goal. I think we can have that accomplished, but it really has only happened because of the last, not just my work, but really the last 10 plus years worth of work, building up the nonprofit infrastructure and capacity in the city, building up the knowledge base of the homeowners, letting people have choice in what goes on in their neighborhood, and ultimately giving them the opportunity to reduce their risk and also beautify their neighborhood at the same time. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Nella.
Thanks, Nick. Super to hear, and I love seeing all those images. So now Mark is going to just share with us a couple of the frequently asked questions that he has already been fielding, and then we'll open it up to participants. Mark, go ahead. I'll unmute you. There you
go. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks, Michele. Thanks, Nick, for really sharing your experiences. It's we get to hear your stories here at Enterprise pretty frequently, but it's always great to hear how it grows on a case-by-case basis. So I really appreciate both of you sharing your different experiences. And so I want to run over two quick things that these are sort of the two questions I've received most of over the last last 2 months since we opened the application. Well, one, we just want to make all of the applicants aware that we know that the first host webinar, that the audio is of poor quality when the host organizations speak. We apologize for that. At this moment, we really cannot rectify the issues because it was already recorded and we cannot amplify the audio. So again, we apologize for that. And so what we have done is extend opportunity for applicants who are interested in those 4 organizations to actually reach out and talk to those hosts. Now, along that same line, so knowing that that was an issue, what we want to do moving forward is if you do have any questions to the host organizations, we ask that you field them and send them to us so that we can coalesce them and send them to the host organizations. At this moment, we're looking at 100+ applicants at the moment, so we do not want to inundate the host organizations with questions when we can field them all and send them to them at one time. And those questions that are being asked will be modified on the Fellows FAQ PDF that's on our website, and we will modify that document after this webinar and also any other questions that we receive throughout the application process. So those are the two that I have at the moment, and just want to reiterate that there are 8 opportunities this coming year that will start on October 1st. 3 of them being traditional Rose Fellows, or 3 of them the new arts opportunities, and 5 of them being the traditional Rose Fellowship opportunities. So that being said, I'll pass it back to Nella to talk a little bit about our resources.
Great. I just wanted to highlight a couple of resources available on our website for people who want to know a little more and may be interested specifically in knowing what's relevant to you as a prospective fellow. So I thought I would just highlight these. You can find them at enterprisecommunity.org under our solutions area, and we have a number of publications and reports and how-to guides. Many of them have been developed by fellows to provide new content that they felt like they wished they'd had when they became fellows. So for example, the Participatory Design Toolkit was produced by Teresa Wong, who was a fellow in LA several years back, and it includes a lot of exercises that she did in collaboration with residents to get specific design feedback for projects that she was working on. And we have a number of case studies available in the 8 Reasons to Do Creative Placemaking, Made with Love, and a couple of new publications on our website. They feature a lot of Rose Fellows projects and other similar projects that would be inspiring for many of you. And you can find at these links these kind of curated selection of downloadable tools, as well as a webinar series, which we recently hosted on creative placemaking. And there were 6 webinars in this series, and the 5th webinar features 2 alums of the Rose Fellow Program, one including Mark, and speaking about how they really figured out how to work with their budget in getting creative placemaking projects done. And then the 6th one, which took place in January, features a couple pairs of artists and developers working together and asks them some questions about their experience. So that's particularly helpful, I think, for those of you who are interested in the artist fellowships. So again, check out all these resources online. There's a lot to find on the Enterprise website. So if you need help navigating them, feel free to reach out to me and Mark. So we have now got time to answer questions. And so what I'm going to start with is just a couple that I think maybe I'll direct first to Nick and Michele, and then Mark, you might have some comments as well. So this is one question that I like to start with and I often ask, and then I have a couple others from prospective applicants. The question I like to ask is, I'm always curious to hear, Nick, when you applied for the fellowship and you began, what were you ready for and what weren't you ready for?
That's a good question. So I think when I started my fellowship, I really went into it with the mindset of just pushing pause in my career. I've been doing work, for quite a while as an architect. I'm doing community work, but I wanted to take a moment to sort of push pause and really kind of take a step back and learn for 3 years, with no expectations, just kind of learn. And so that was the mindset. But what I thought I was going to be getting and what actually happened were quite different. I was ready for all of the sort of community engagement part. I had a lot of experience in that. I was pretty confident in that. I was really good working with homeowners, facilitating design conversations. The pieces and parts I probably wasn't ready for was really two things. It was the pace that public sector work sort of moves at. I was not particularly patient when I started. I was ready to get things done now. And then the second thing was really all of the sort of technical mechanisms at play that you need to really have a mastery of to get projects off the ground. Anything from understanding compliance requirements using federal funding to LIHTC spreadsheets to, understanding the politics of working in the public sector. A lot of that I was not really prepared for.
Great. I feel like it's a good sneak peek for probably anyone. There's a lot of stuff that's hard to predict. Michele, anything you wanted to add? And then we've got a couple questions coming in from participants.
I think Nick summed it up pretty well. What I would say too, one thing that it took me a minute to catch on to was that when I was coming into an organization that's established and well established, as all of the new hosts are too, is, you're not taking Linda's job. This is a new position, and it takes a little bit of time for everyone to figure out what you're going to do. The work plan that you're responding to for your application was developed some time ago without you specifically in mind. And so if there's points in the work plan that you think are right aligned with what you can do, but there's some that you're not sure about, I think that what I learned really through the first year and even the second year is that, what I can do and what I can offer the organization isn't necessarily something that they realized they wanted or needed. And figuring out how to, you'll figure out how to go along with the bureaucracy, and Nick, being at a quasi-government organization, probably experienced that a little bit more than I did. But it takes, you're going to go through this time that's learning, and that was something that I was gung-ho and ready to go, but it was a moment of me saying, wait a minute, this is a new position, and this is writing a new path, right, as in with a pencil instead of right or wrong. So, yeah.
Super. We've got a couple questions coming in. I'm gonna send one to Mark. So Mark, can you talk a little bit about the types of background and experience we're looking for and that would be necessary for the arts-based fellowships specifically?
Sure. Thanks, Nella. So I mean, specifically for artists, we're not limiting you to your medium. You know, we're looking for teaching artists, culture bearers in all disciplines. You know, they're not limited to visual or performing arts, traditional and folk arts, digital media, et cetera, et cetera. We're really looking for folks who are in the art field that have experience in leadership roles in working in a community-based project. You have a track record of a collaborative process, really working with community and the projects that you've initiated. Really the ability to articulate your approach to a project or challenge that you've worked in the past, and really to talk a little bit about your reflection on those experiences. And we also want to hear from you because, as I mentioned earlier in that triad, that part of this team is you as the fellow. So we also want to hear from you, the artist, like, what does this mean for your professional career trajectory? Like, how will the fellowship help you move in a direction that you are trying to move towards? One of the things that are critical, not just specifically for artist fellows, but as a fellow as a whole, is that we look for people who have varying experiences and roles, comfort levels, and a broad spectrum of experience that have worked in different scales in a community, meaning from folks working in the CDC world, in sort of government agencies, all the way down to community members. It's not necessarily a requirement, but it is a plus to have where you do have this specific skill set to bring to the table and leverage your position as a Rose Fellow. And then also to talk a little bit about can you articulate the added value arts and cultural strategies how it can impact these host organizations that you're going to partner with? We want to make sure that you are able to advocate for the importance of your field, and we also require this of our architects and landscape architects fellows, that to be able to advocate what design can really bring to the table and how they can be meaningful problem-solving solutions to everyday problems that are dealt with in these communities. That's just a brief summarization of what we're looking for. Again, some of this criteria is outlined in the application process based on what we've outlined in Slide Room. So those are just some of the things that I think are that I wanted to bring to the fold.
Great. So I have a couple questions that kind of come together.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm getting a little background noise. Okay, hopefully that helps. All right, I have a couple questions that come together. This is for Michele and Nick. How much autonomy do you have in your everyday work, and how much time is spent designing versus in community engagement or other aspects? And also, what does mentorship look like from the host and from enterprise? And I'm going to go to Michele first.
Well, first I'll say, I think to answer all of these with just a really broad stroke answer is that each host is going to end up being really different. And so for me, the autonomy and independence and kind of foothold I've established really came after time, and learning what my organizations were trying to achieve and where I could fit into those places. And so there's times where I'm doing a project by myself and holding community meetings alone, but then there's times where, the entire senior vice president board of Hope Credit Union is there too. So it really changes based on the project to project. And then as far as design and speaking from my own experience compared to what a lot of the other fellows are doing, since I'm at a small organization where we're doing small projects quickly, I do probably a little bit more design than some of the fellows who have been hosted at larger organizations. And I think that one thing to make clear is that the fellow is not the host organization's architect. You shouldn't be responsible for designing a whole new multifamily housing unit, but you should be in a role where you're assisting in that. And so I spend time doing, if I had to say in the last year, I spent maybe 25% of my time doing some design work and the majority of the other work was project management towards design, as well as community engagement.
Great. Nick, do you want to give, I think your breakdown's a little different, and Mark, when you were a fellow too, yours is a little different. So Nick, let's hear your version of that. How much time do you spend doing design work, community engagement, other work? How much autonomy do you have in your everyday?
Yeah, so I would say there are certain pieces and parts of this fellowship where I have almost 100% autonomy. You know, when we were developing the structure for the community adaptation program, there were a few things that we had to hit, a few targets, but how we got there was really kind of on me. There was really nobody else in the office working on it, and so that was an opportunity for me to really you know, explore and flex my muscles and sort of see what I could do. There are other pieces where I have very little autonomy, you know, because you're working in the public sector. There are certain things that have to be done certain ways, and you know, there's a hierarchy that you need to go through to get decisions approved. So I would say it varies case by case, but in general, I feel like I control my own schedule. I control my day. I sort of manage my own workload the majority of the time. I do design work. I probably have done maybe two tasks in the last 2 years that require any sort of architectural design. I do some graphic design. You know, I built the logo and the graphic template for the program and things like that. But generally, I do very little design. I'll review designs as they come through. When we have proposals for new housing developments, I'll review that. I'll review our commercial improvement design proposals. But as far as being the designer in-house, I really haven't done much of any of that.
Great. So Mark, I'm going to ask you to speak with your alumni hat on and talk a little bit about your experience. And if you want to highlight sort of what ways you used your design skills in your role at Nuestra CDC, that'd be great. But also tell us a little bit about your mentorship experience and your relationship with Enterprise and your host organization from a mentorship point of view.
Gotcha. Okay, great. So as Nell mentioned, I was based in Boston, Massachusetts with Nuestra CDC. And I think for about the first 6 months, I was on a self-imposed tether. I guess, you know, coming into this work, I really approached it not coming in as an expert, but really as a listener to figure out how I could be of help, not coming in with solutions to solve all and any of their problems. It was a matter of sort of observing and listening. And you know, counter to what Michele and Nick's experience was, I was able to leverage a lot of design opportunities. And I think Michele really worded this really well, which was project management with design involved in it, where I was able to set some of our goals for all of our real estate projects and really help work with architects in the very beginning to help come up with a schematic design. That really helped bridge a really trustworthy experience with a lot of our design teams and our consultants. And also I've got a lot to do design build projects within the local community partners that I met with some of the initiatives I started through community engagement. So there were varying levels of like design components. Like as Nick mentioned, I was also able to do a little bit graphic design, design build, and early schematic design throughout the process of my fellowship. But that came as an opportunity, you know, when I wasn't a self-imposed tether, because I was listening to what really needed to happen and letting people sort of show me how things have been done at Nuestra CDC and the community, and before there were ever any solutions that were devised. And it was always sort of a team effort. Mentorship-wise, I came into the fellowship unlicensed. I still needed some hours of IDP. I finished all of my IDP with the Rose Fellowship. Post-fellowship, I then took my exam. So I focus more on understanding the real estate development component of the fellowship, and then finish my ARE after post-fellowship. And then Nella, I'm just going to go in and answer one of the questions on here, which is what a lot of fellows end up doing post-fellowship, is about 75 to 80% of our fellows stay with the organizations because their work is really, they're still very committed to the work. And we have a huge track record of fellows staying with the organization and also sort of staying within the community because of the relationships and partnerships they built throughout the fellowship. Others in the past have taken on leadership roles after the fellowship, a few years after the fellowship. One of my colleagues, good colleague of mine, Nate Poole, he's now the design director of the Yakima Housing Authority. So he used his experience in that region of the country and then, moved himself in a position to help improve the city of Yakima through sort of policy and leadership role. It was just something that he wanted to usher. There is an opportunity here and a level of autonomy for you to craft your trajectory. It really depends on the experiences that you want to improve, that you're sort of trying to improve with yourself.
Another good example is a classmate of Mark's who worked closely with architects throughout his fellowship and then joined the firm that he had worked with, and so now his host, the organization that was his host organization, is now his client, and he's on the architecture design firm side.
Right, and now he is now a partner of that architecture firm, which is great. The fellowship does really put you in a leadership role. And that, depending on how you use that platform, is totally up to you.
To some degree, it's a little uncharted. Okay. Go ahead, Mark.
There's a technical question on here that I wanted to answer on here, and it's about the PSL, or public service loan forgiveness. So in this scenario, as a Rose Fellow, you are actually a direct employee of the host, and all our partnerships are with 501c3s. So the organization does qualify for the public service loan forgiveness, but you have to fill out the paperwork as the fellow with the organization. You are not a direct employee of Enterprise. You're a direct employee of the host organization. So any paperwork that's associated with that program, you have to fill it out as required by the program. So I think that should answer at least the post-fellowship and that technical question that was outlaid.
So maybe we could go to Nick and Michele again and hear if you guys have, we have kind of like a bookend. I'm going to put a couple questions together as a kind of bookend question. So what aspects of the selection process did you find most interesting, exciting, or do you have advice on? And then where do you see yourself going next after the fellowship? So I guess I'll go to Nick first.
So the selection process I found to be really exciting and impactful to me. The way that it was structured, I'm not sure if you all still do it this way for this cohort, Nella, but we had a finalist summit, and that was an opportunity to meet people from around the country that were interested in the fellowship. And, there were a few people that are not fellows that I met at the fellowship summit that I still keep in contact with, because it's just a really great opportunity to meet people that are doing really incredible work around the country. Post-fellowship, I don't really have a plan mapped out right now. I mean, this program that we're running runs through 2022. I know that, if I want to stay on, that opportunity is there. But I also know that I really enjoy designing, and so trying to figure out, where I can have sort of scratch that design itch, I guess, so to speak, is a question that I'm sort of toying with right now. But I would love to stay on and see this project through for sure.
Michele, any thoughts or advice on the application process and thoughts on your professional trajectory?
Well, so I think I mentioned before, like, as you're applying, if the work plan doesn't exactly align with everything you think you're qualified for, I still wouldn't stop from applying. I think that's one thing, especially, you know, meeting the host in person and talking with them in person. It became clear they wrote their work plan and with the idea that anybody might come, and they didn't know me particularly, they didn't know Nick, you know, so it was something that I used to be a teacher too, so I find myself giving this advice to students, but, you know, don't limit yourself because you don't match 100%. Like, you have skills that really can benefit the host, and if their mission aligns with yours, I would say that's what you should go for, what they have a vision for in the future aligns with yours. You can definitely provide them with some guidance and be a great resource for them. For me, what's next is, at the moment, I'm planning to stay in Mississippi and working with Delta DB and Hope. What form that takes, I'm not exactly sure. We're starting to have that conversation, but I've got, I guess, a little less than 9 months left to figure it out, or a little more than 9 months, I should say. But the plan is to continue to work in the Delta and to address the housing needs in the Delta and community engagement. So I get to stay with these great community members that I've developed relationships with, as well as my hosts in some form. What that is isn't quite sure, but it's a job and it's where I want to be.
Great. I'm going to stick with you, Michele, because we have a question that I feel like is a natural segue from what you just said about the community you've been working with. So we have a participant who's asking, saying he's curious about the relationship between fellows and the local community, and in what ways maybe do you feel you've been passing through, or do you feel part of the community versus just embedded there, and what has made the difference for you? And I'll say, you know, the caveat being also, you know, some fellows really relocate to be in their fellowship. Others apply for a fellowship in a place that they're already familiar with. So, of course, this answer is going to really vary from fellow to fellow. But, Michele, can you talk a little bit about that in your case?
Sure. Well, I relocated to Mississippi to be here with my host, but what set the groundwork and gaining community trust and the ability to engage, well, in perspective quite quickly with the community is because my hosts had both set up such strong relationships. And so when I walked in and I said I worked for them, it was instantly recognized that, oh, we know them, we trust them. So that really has helped me to be more productive and impactful in the relationships I've had. And all of these incoming hosts, these 8 organizations, have been in their communities for so long and have built that same trust. So being able to leverage that existing relationship is really essential. I know, you know, I moved to the Delta. I'm originally from Wisconsin and have lived in 6 other places besides Wisconsin. And so I've adapted to life here. I say y'all, I've dropped my G's and I drink sweet tea, but it takes some time to get there. And you're talking to me in my 3rd year. And so if you talk to me in the first 2 months of my first year, it was a totally different answer.
Thanks. Mark, did you want to add something?
No, I just think both Nick and Michele are sort of relaying the growth process that happens in the fellowship, which I think is interesting, and really part of the great opportunity you get in this fellowship is that there's a pause, as Nick mentioned, for you to really, you know, ask questions about your trajectory and what you're really interested in. but also you get to build these partnerships that give you a level of focus actually after the end of your fellowship in a direction where you want to head. So, that's great.
Yeah. So we have filled the hour with lots of wonderful conversation. And you can see there are email addresses at the bottom where you can reach us if you want to continue to ask questions or if you feel like the question that you had wasn't really answered. The survey at the end of this call will also prompt you to share any unanswered questions. And as Mark mentioned, we will be updating our FAQs, and we sometimes just respond directly to the questions just to you one-on-one by email as well. So don't hesitate to reach out, and we look forward to hearing from you all. And I want to say again a special thank you to Michele and Nick specifically for sharing some of your stories and images from your fellowships, as well as some of the wisdom that you've gained over the couple of years that you've been in each of these places. So thanks for sharing your thoughts and wisdom, and Mark as well. Mark, any final thoughts before we sign off?
Just again, as Nella mentioned, please email me directly. My email is at the last slide. And I also put it on the Q&A section. Just email me directly and I can help facilitate those questions. And if they're directed to the host, I will send them all along. And as Nella mentioned, we'll update the FAQ. And I really appreciate all of you participating. Again, also thank you to Nick and Michele.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Take care. Bye.